Hey, Reality Riffing. As part of our Interstellar Star School buildup, I wanted to make sure that you get to hear some of the amazing astrological predictions of Horary Master Astrologer Kevin Stein and our very own Evolutionary Astrologer Tashi Powers. We talk about the election, which is still on the table here in terms of one of the most interesting elections I've ever lived through here in America. So we talk about election astrology and we just talk about political astrology. I love political astrology. I think it's just so fascinating. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with really just the top of their fields, Tashi and Kevin, and it was just a pleasure to sit down and be able to talk shop with them. Hi there, and welcome to Reality Riffing. I'm here with two incredible astrologers. Many of you know Tashi Powers, and we are joined by Kevin Stein, who is a secret master of the Horary Astrological Technologies. And I've been, Kevin, you don't know, maybe you do, but I ask questions through Tashi of you all the time. And so happy to meet you finally in the ethers. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
So it's July 4th, and it is the kind of numerologically significant 244 years. Am I right about that? Since 1776? And so we have, and it's a very auspicious day astrologically, cosmologically, and we are also going into a very intense kind of election season, as well as just being in a very intense time on planet Earth. So I really wanted to have a conversation with you both, pick your brains about just kind of the general nuance of this particular day. So would love to just start there in terms of this eclipse and how it's going to move and kind of energetically infuse the next 6 months. And then let's go to the US chart and beyond, if you don't mind.
All right, well, since Kevin's new today, I won't throw him in the deep end of the pool. I'll say hello, everybody. And so the eclipse tonight is a very wonderfully powerful new level of this archetypal wave that is continuing to sweep humanity forward. It's just one more, central cosmos wave that says, wake up. And the news about this one is it's on the dog star Sirius, which for those of us in the deep state, like the president and all these people are just kind of governed in many, many people's eyes for, centuries by this dog star energy, Sirius, which is at 13 Cancer. And today that is where the US sun, that's our birthday, born with the sun conjunct the dog star on purpose. And it corresponds to the third eye in the dollar bill. And it's very much about our history as an American people. And so this is probably one of the biggest wake-up calls we could ever have as an eclipse on our sun. And it's a full moon eclipse, which means a door closes and another door opens. And it sets the stage for elections because it's the eclipse before the election.
Yeah.
So it's an important one to study. And the interesting news about it is that it's on Donald J. Trump's sun. His sun is at 13 Cancer. Kevin can tell you a little about that, right, Kevin?
Well, I think that an eclipse in Horary is actually related to the nodes. And the nodes are very mysterious. They bring us into this life and they take us out through a spindle where we choose our incarnation, but that's sort of a sidebar. Again, with this type of eclipse, the moon is in the shadow of the earth. So we're talking about a shadow period for an individual where the eclipse is personal. I looked at his solar return and he has Saturn and the sun in the 12th house, speaking of the shadow lands. So the sun, not very well hosted in the 12th generally, depending on sign, of course. But wonderful teacher, my first teacher, Isabel Hickey, used to say that was a signature of serve or suffer. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier about the fireworks display in South Dakota. In more ways than one, it was a fireworks display.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of emblematic of the way that, you know, this sun is hidden, but it's going to fight one way or the other. It also is the signature with Saturn of being one's own worst enemy. Which we've seen in a president who likes to talk, has a very busy Mercury, unfettered Mercury.
His Mercury's in Twitter. His Mercury's in the sign of Twitter.
Exactly right. The 13th sign of the zodiac.
Exactly.
There.
Wouldn't you also say that kind of Sun Saturn in the 12th house can also be it's a call, especially with this eclipse and everything, to have a spiritual awakening of some sort?
One would always hope.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. There's a psychic dimension to anything in the 12th house, which is taking us to the beyond and bringing it back in as a portal. So there's always hope. And I think no matter what happens, we have to come from a place of hope and light. And so that's very appropriate with an eclipse where the poor moon does not have a light of her own, you know, whether or not she's shining with sunlight or in the Earth's shadow. And I just wanted to relate it to the nodes again. Interestingly, in a political chart where you were looking for rulership, you would look for fixed stars, particularly Regulus or Spica. Joe Biden has Regulus on his North Node. Trump has Regulus rising. So, you know, the first thing I did when Tashi told us about our homework assignment was look to see whether or not there were fixed stars. Because if Joe Biden didn't have any fixed stars, the royal fixed stars, we would call them, the watchers of the four signs associated with the solstices and the equinoxes. If he didn't, then it would be clear he didn't have a shot.
Right.
Trump on election day has his North Node returning to its birth position. And Tashi and I were talking about that earlier. That could be an indication. Whatever happens, it's an indication of, with an eclipse, of magnification, one way or the other. So to your point, it could be, you know, with somebody who is ordinary and not extraordinary, it gives you a chance to set the reset button and say, okay, I've gone through this cycle. Have I grown? Have I measured up to the North Node calling of my destiny?
So,
I want to ask a quick question, Kevin.
Yeah.
Also, like Saturn in the 12th with the sun, because I actually, you know, think that American politics are quite run by the Illuminati or something like that. I don't know exactly how it works, but couldn't it be the Saturn people in the 12th fed up now with the lack of the good actor of the sun?
I see it as a soul who is suffering. I mean, when I see the president, I see somebody through all of the bombast. And, you know, I think that she really saw, you know, the placement of Saturn in the 12th as a do or die lifetime. I mean, basically, you know, if you don't serve, you will suffer. She also indicated that it was a signature of great selfishness that had to be overcome through service. Obviously, it's opposite the 6th house, where we come, you know, ordinarily in the evolutionary path described by traditional astrology. I'll let Tashi, who is the doyen and guru of evolutionary, speak to what it represents, the 6th house. And, you know, in Horary, it represents pets, right, and servants, you know, from the, you know, 1600 tradition. But I think Gurdjieff once said, learn love from animals first. And I think that's why pets are in the house of service, right? They serve to show us how to love unconditionally.
Right. They're also kind of the protectors of, they're kind of the, in other traditions, they're like the Dharma protectors, a lot of the animal or um, the daemons, you know. So I would love to just, because I think this is a fascinating moment beyond, like, before we get really deeply into kind of the Biden and Trump charts and the next eclipses and the election. I'd love to talk a little bit about the chart of America, because obviously there's a genesis, there's a major kind of awakening happening, and so I'd love to look at the chart of America. And this eclipse, and hear anything either of you have that you think is relevant for those listening to really start to kind of integrate.
Well, I think Kevin will talk as well about the Jupiter, Sun, Venus, wealth connection of the chart. But really what we're all dealing with right now is that we're having a Pluto return. And in the US chart, Pluto's at 27 Capricorn. So it's close enough that the Pluto return has been we're working on it. And Pluto basically grabs Persephone and takes her down into hell. I mean, a Pluto transit is going deeply into a dark space and seeing if you can emerge back into the light. And it's like 6 months in the darkness and 6 months back in the light. And it's connected to the cycles of crops, the death and rebirth crops. Persephone was the daughter of Ceres, Demeter. So it's all about the earth cycles and the sun going down into the southern hemisphere and coming back up again. But they told these things allegorically before they understood science as well as or the paradigm that we live in, the grid that we live in. And so I think we are in, that underworld right now. And we're in the deep, dark parts of our own psyche that are reflected in this huge, have not, black, white, this huge separation in our society here of why we don't get things done well, because it's not just a president, it's a population of people that are very divided. And Pluto in Capricorn asks us to be responsible and to be soulful and to mature. And this is a notoriously immature country. And that's why everybody likes it, because we have Disneyland and we have movies, But maturity, we definitely have some artistic maturity and fabulous, much fabulous, wonderful. But, we didn't invent opera. You know what I mean? We have Disneyland. So we're trying to mature. Kevin?
You dropped out, maybe fortunately. Maybe it was an act of the Almighty. You reminded me that in Horary, the public is represented by the moon, also in Western astrology. And Tashi, I think you mentioned that on election day it's in Gemini, is it not?
Yes.
So to me, that's a great picture of the split in the country that's been engineered probably from foreign countries. But the thing that I wanted to cite is tagging on what Tashi was saying about the great Greek myth. Plutos in ancient Greek means wealth. He was traditionally associated with the god of wealth and gold. It also means gold. So I think what's lost many times, and Tashi touched on this, is that Pluto has a bad reputation for being the bad boy of the zodiac, but actually, it's part of the life cycle. That's why, some interpretations of the Greek myth say that it was the birth of the seasons, which I think is kind of off course. But, Tashi and I for many years have been predicting that the Pluto return of the United States and values would upend the current system. So in terms of what's happening now, I think it's also one of the things that Tashi and I wanted to talk about is the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, which comes around, only in a while. And now it's going into the air element for the first time in, I don't know, 1,000 years or so,
Wow.
maybe. Is it?
I think so, yeah. It's a long time. Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn hasn't happened for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's a big cycle that we're in.
It's a huge cycle. And so if you look at that, that's also in Capricorn, and it's opposite the stellium that the United States has, of course, in Cancer with the Cancer Sun, Jupiter, and Venus, the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. So I think that that opposition is also bringing this, economic downturn into high relief. Interestingly, China is in the sign of Cancer, and that opposition, I think, is also playing out with respect to the pandemic. If you go back to even the movement of Saturn into Aquarius. Saturn in Aquarius is the perfect picture of the pandemic. You've got the air element totally restricted and people going into lockdown as a result of the restrictedness of Saturn, even though, Saturn is in its ruler, but that just makes it more powerful.
Interesting. And what do you think? It doesn't seem like Saturn going back into Capricorn has helped us any. with that particular issue.
I gather you are a lord of the understatement.
It's only been a day.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, everybody was like, what'll happen when Saturn goes back into Capricorn? I said, they'll close it all back down again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's the Capricorn is very restrictive. I think once Jupiter and Saturn get together in Aquarius in December, January of 2021, and those eclipses unfold, there's going to be a lot of change. I mean, for me, I see the election is pretty black and white kind of change, but I know better because this country is so complex, and the election system is not exactly democratic and honest most of the time. So it really depends on how much people can get away with, in my humble opinion. But I actually think that the people that run Trump can't run him. He's just too hard to handle for even if there's an Illuminati. My sense is that they're fed up. I also think the American people at the moment are fed up. There's so much death here, and we're kind of, it's kind of annoying that you can't get on a plane and go to Canada or Europe. They won't let us in. I think that's got people kind of mad.
Yeah.
Because Europe closed down their borders, and America has 50 countries basically that don't get along with each other. They've never had to. Get along. We've never had to have any kind of, unified anything. We haven't had this situation. We didn't get Ebola in America, so we didn't know how to deal with it.
When you're looking at these big kind of movements of empires, because I'm very curious now, Kevin, because you were looking at also China's birth chart. These movements of empires, what are you looking at as markers of the empire falling? I think that's
Pluto. Pluto, right on the money.
Yeah.
Associated with the fall of the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, trading empire, and Rome. So that's a triple heater right there. So in a way, those of us who are looking at, the Pluto return have been saying this is a total transformation. Now, obviously, transformation for those of us who are spiritual opportunists is a good thing.
Yeah.
Especially when it's speaking to what a society values.
Yes.
The other distinction to make is Tashi and I come different, sometimes corners of the astrological tennis table. And so in Horary, we look at the outer planets, which were not discovered until the modern period, as more like fixed stars, which I was referring to earlier. So traditionally, Pluto in Horary is definitely a sign of the dark side, the dark zodiac, unremittingly. Neptune is associated with illusion, delusion, a lot of the things that it's known for in modern Western 20th century. It's also known as the harbinger of earthquakes in Horary, and my wonderful Horary teacher, John Frawley, has done a lecture on the earthquake of Lisbon and others that shows how Neptune is associated with it. One would think that Uranus wants to take the credit for that,
Right.
but Uranus actually in Horary we usually see in a chart where it indicates by exactitude divorce.
Yeah.
So it's a separator, and I think Uranus is highly charged on election day. I mean, we look at a lot of things. When Tashi and I were discussing this, there are many ways to skin the electional cat, and one of them is to look at election day, of course, and also the inauguration. So we looked at the inaugural charts for both. I mentioned that the election and inauguration have specific transits occurring to the nodes. But the other thing is that astrologers look at where the moon is on inauguration, and we have a triple
burner.
A week before inauguration is the exact 23-degree Capricorn conjunction of Jupiter Saturn.
Right.
But we will have that as a foreshadow, but also a void of course Moon and Uranus making a hard aspect to the Sun that day. That over a long period of time indicates that whoever's sworn in will not complete their term. With the exception of Obama, where he just had the void of course Moon, and I don't know if you remember, but Justice Roberts fumbled the oath of office, and they had to redo it the next day.
The Mercury was in retrograde as well.
Mercury was in retrograde also during the Bush, the 2000, where it had to go to the Supreme Court. So I think seeing that those conditions are going to be present is testimony that it's not going to be just sort of a black and white situation.
Yeah.
I also think that the indications are that the president may be ill. I've been saying this for a long time, but I believe on election day, that he has a number of planets that are transiting from the 5th to the 6th, including Saturn.
Yeah.
So could be that everything is not all right in Dodge.
And there are astrologers advising the presidential and the country and all these things. It's hard to believe, but there are. They've been there a long time. I've met them. I've met them in person, had lunch with them. I met them, and they can see this Babylonian. So when I was learning electional astrology, there's a wonderful guy named Arthur Chadburn. We should have him on, Guru Jagat. He knows this Babylonian technique. And you put the sun at sunset the night before the day, and that tells you about the next day. And we did it for years with him in a master class in Los Angeles, and it really works. So this Sun Uranus on the descendant ascendant, it absolutely shows a change. And I think that the Juno with the sun, there's a Sun Juno conjunction in Scorpio. The sun's always in Scorpio on the election in November. It's always at 10 Scorpio, but this year Juno's at 14 Scorpio and Uranus is at 8 Taurus. So there's this Taurus Scorpio energy. And I think that the woman who becomes the vice president may become the president, Kevin, if that's what you're saying, that the Sun Uranus shows an interruption. But also what I was saying at first about the astrologers, they probably redid that on purpose the next day to get a better chart, because astrologers do that all the time.
Right. Yeah, no, this stuff is being looked at very, very closely.
Yeah, and so if you have a bad chart, you just make a reason to get a new chart, and then you've made a new grid with reality. And you can do that because you have the ability, as Yogi Bhajan would say, to co-create with the cosmos. And the Illuminati type people absolutely know this truth. And Sirius, which is what this eclipse is bringing us to us now,
Yeah.
means that all of us, because the moon's involved, all of us in the world can also decide to change our reality. And since we are not just in a presidential run in this country, we are at a place where I think Mother Earth is telling us, get it together or I'm going to shake you off. That's kind of how I feel, what she's up to. And many astrologers all over the world agree with this premise, that it's time for us to find a unity kind of consciousness, which in evolutionary astrology, we talk about our interdependence. And it's watched by Neptune, and Neptune is in Pisces. So for me, this election has to do with Mars hit Chiron, the woundedness, hit the nodes in Chiron. Now it's moving towards Chiron, so there's more woundedness. Then it's going to move eventually on Inauguration Day, almost exactly to Neptune. And Mars Neptune's a new dream. There's a new dream coming. What it looks like, who comes up with a new dream, but it's a new dream because we are collectively together in this. And I don't think that you can see what's going on in the streets all over the world. I don't think we're going to keep the same dream. I think we've woken up and we realize we came this close to death. And now they're saying, oh, there's a new permeation of the virus and you can come this close to death again. So I think we're looking at our mortality. And that's Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, Neptune.
But I would love to talk a little bit about the transcendence of this as well, because I mean, all of this Capricorn is also kind of, if worked properly, if there is a willingness to grow up. I mean, there's also kind of even a deeper rooted kind of stability that happens out of this. Am I wrong?
No, right, exactly. Kevin, you agree, of course.
That would be the gift. That would be the gift of Saturn in Aquarius, to give a foundational framework for the Aquarian frequency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it will be tested, and I think that one of the reasons for the virus is that it is the micro speaking to the macro and saying we need to understand what our values are going forward. So at the beginning, I think when people were not in denial or magically thinking in the United States, at least, I think people we're down to the basics, Yeah. I saw a cartoon with two aliens talking to one another, and one of them was saying, "Hell, should we go down for a visit?" And the other one said, "I don't think so. They're fighting over toilet paper right now." So I think that survival became an issue where people were stocking up and thinking, what are we going to have to do? Well, did we cover the U.S. chart enough in terms of what's being activated and going on?
I mean, I'm always, for years, I've studied the U.S. chart because I am very interested in these rise and falls of empires, and obviously we are. I mean, I think something that some of these younger generations don't understand is that they're a lot of their freedom to kind of do the things, eat their avocado toast, is because of the rule of the Empire of America in how it has been. And as that changes, lots is going to change with it. So I've been very fascinated with the American chart. Also, it's a very interesting chart, that American natal chart. But yeah, no, I'm always interested in knowing more, because I think more than, I mean, these political players are actors of really the aura of this chart of America.
Well, we've been talking about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and also eclipses. So one of the things I'd recommend as a horary homework assignment for you is do the charts for America based on the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that was prior to the convention, as well as the eclipse that was prior to the convention and after the convention. That can shed real light on the forces that were going on. So I was just recommending that if you want greater insight into the U.S. chart as a homework assignment, you might take a look at the eclipse immediately before and immediately after, as well as the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction prior to it, because that will really shed light on the greater patterns. When you're talking about empire, when you're talking about forces that are greater than the snapshot that we get when the starting gun goes off and we see the potentials in a natal chart. But I think that they're really a confluence of other movements and rhythms that are going on prior to that. The other thing, just as a side note, is I've known a lot of astrosophers of the Steiner anthroposophical stream, and regarded some of them as great teachers of mine. They believe that the Star of Bethlehem was the Saturn Jupiter conjunction of 6 BC. Mm-hmm. That the Persian astrologers recognized, they thought it was Zarathustra, but made their way to Bethlehem as a result of seeing that, what makes sense to me as a conjunction. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But that's one thing that I think could shed even greater light if you're a student of the American chart. And of course, there's a lot of debate over time and everything else. I think that when you look into those other charts, it'll really shed light, and the time really doesn't matter as much as it would in a personal natal chart, right?
Because it's a bigger movement,
bigger picture.
Yeah. And anything else in terms of today's eclipse, and then the eclipse that we're going to have on the 30th, right, of November? I saw the chart you guys had here.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, you talk about the eclipse. I've already spoken about it a few times. Oh, I'm throwing him into the pool and can't hear me. Okay. So the eclipse, the 30th of November, that eclipse, let me just grab it here.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
You know, the election will be over. But it does sort of give us a prescient insight into what could have just happened. All right. And the Sun Juno conjunction is on Mars in Biden's chart. And for me, that's that he picks a very powerful running mate, and that's what gets him elected. Because Trump can't change Pence. He can't change anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that Juno shows us a Black woman. Scorpio is often, in evolutionary astrology, it's the tribe of, Black-skinned individuals or darker skinned. And so I think that Sun, Juno, Mars is really fighting. The Mars is fighting. And it's going to be harder to steal an election when there's this level of fighting happening. And then in that eclipse as well, when you're looking at the public, you can see, well, where's this moon? It's in Taurus on the election day. And in Gemini, hold on, what's going on? It's not in Taurus. This is the Monday night before. So it's in Gemini, and there it is on the outside, sorry. That was Biden's moon in Taurus. At Gemini moon, if you know Geminis, like I'm a Gemini, we are, mercurial. We change our mind mid-sentence because we download a bunch of information about all 12 sides of what's happening. And so until we finished a sentence, you don't know what we're going to say.
Yeah, true.
I think it's so true. And so the Gemini moon in this election day chart, this is not the, I'm sorry, I was answering the election day chart, not there it is, the eclipse. Kevin, what do you have to say?
I've been lost in the ozone here, reconnecting. I've been thinking maybe this is a talk about Mercury in retrograde. Actually,
it's been like this. It's been
what I
this.
mean?
Yes.
I don't know, Tashi. I didn't hear what you were saying. But one thing I wanted to say about the Pluto return, which I think is really important, is that Isabel Hickey, my teacher, the wonderful grand dame of theosophical psychic astrology in Boston for many, many years, she said that the outers, when they made their exactitude, the effect had largely already occurred. And so, we're actually in the run-up to that, which doesn't really take place, I think, until 2022. But I wanted to just make sure that I got that in, because people might say, well, the exact return hasn't happened.
Right.
But I think even if you look at individual Saturn returns, there's always sort of this ramp up period, and often there might be an event that punctuates it, right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly, because Saturn, Pallas, and Jupiter are already at 27. They're already there this year, so it's pulling it all together. It's like a midpoint effect when you're reading a chart. It's pulling it all together. So our Pluto return, because of that, has started as Jupiter and Saturn went through, and Saturn went on the Pluto.
It certainly feels like it started, huh?
Yeah. Been dragged into the bowels of Pluto. I've been studying Pluto with the Evolutionary Astrology School since the 90s. And in the 90s, Jeffrey predicted this pandemic, and he predicted the breakdown as we came towards our Pluto in Capricorn. And he, of course, typified this as the end of Marlboro Man and Betty Crocker. So he saw the Me Too movement coming. He just said, we're going to put our foot down, and we're going to stop all this nonsense. Well, we haven't done that yet, and it's going to take till 2022 for sure, and really till 2024 until Pluto gets into Aquarius for us to really move out of this. But if we don't make better choices as individuals to mature, and we don't make better choices as countries to look at our dictators who are, like China has been accused today on PBS of homicide, I heard. I thought, they're locking people up, and I look at how many impoverished Americans really got COVID more than the wealthier Americans. There is some horrible story here of this Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, this ugly underbelly story of a kind of a, horrible story. I don't know. I just don't want to put words to it. It's so horrible. But I think that you have to look at Pluto, Jupiter, and Pallas Athena in there, and Saturn, and say, we're fighting. We're fighting for our planet. We're fighting for our humanity. We're fighting for a way to actually, as a world, figure out how do we live together on Gaia, on the planet. And of course, those of you who've been listening to me, every time we have a summer solstice and a winter solstice right now, and you had the wonderful Barbara Handclough on as well, the Earth is lining up to the galactic node now. It's just beginning. So from 87 to 2012, it was lining up with the galactic center. Now it's lining up with the galactic node. So there's some sense that the Earth itself is moving in a forward direction and having to align more with the cosmos. That is, I think, the biggest part of what's happening, because of what I see happening in my own meditations and in my own life. That I derive meaning from my own experience, and then I look to the many charts I read and the many things like these charts Kevin and I have studied. You have to study a lot of charts to understand astrology, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for those out there who are listening to this, who are novice or, just interested in kind of the themes on a bigger, we're all looking, I'm scrolling through this wonderful PowerPoint of multiple wheels of time and space. And you're kind of looking at how these are all intersecting, especially when we have these points of very auspicious history, which I think we all can attest to living. You can feel the hairs rise on the back of your neck, being alive on the planet right now, because every choice we make is certainly very important to how the next era is going to be lived and go, and whether we're going to live in it, because planet Earth is going to be fine. And so I think that's more, for those of you not as knowledgeable around these kind of specifics around the astrological sciences that we're speaking of, it's these bigger themes. And I would just say that I think that when we're working in this last kind of gasp of Pluto and Capricorn and all of this Capricorn, and then isn't this also today the last eclipse that we are having in the Cancer Capricorn family for a time?
Yes, they go to Sag and Scorpio now, and Gemini.
And is it 12 years, or how long does it take to go around these eclipses? 18 years?
18.
18. So So, I think part of what is the shadow of the Me Too movement and a lot of kind of the polarization around leadership in general and politics is the positive patriarchy, or the positive father, as the Jungian would call it, as Robert Bly would call it. The positive father is kind of, it has to also rise with the kind of the Ma, or the divine feminine, else the planet actually can't go into this next phase of what we would call the Aquarian age. And I feel that's really a huge part of this election, this eclipse today, the just the kind of natal birth chart destiny of America. I mean, I think it's all connected. What do you guys think about that?
Kevin, you go.
Well, I think that speaking of the patriarchy and an enlightened masculine, as Bly and his and Marion Woodman would talk about. I just also bring it down to the kingdom, right? So the first form of astrology was mundane, and places like Baghdad were actually founded based on their astrological chart. It wasn't really until the medieval period that individuals outside of kings and queens got readings, right? So I think in the last couple of minutes, what I wanted to do, at least bringing it down to sort of that image of the kingdom ruled by an enlightened ruler, as opposed to the tendency of Leo, and Trump has Leo rising. You get either the enlightened despot or the unenlightened despot. For those of your audience who want to try this at home, a horary chart obviously is cast for a moment in time where our faith is that the answer to the question is latent in the time that it's.
Okay, don't try this at home. You don't know enough.
And so
I need Kevin to help me.
Sorry?
I said, they can't try this at home. I need you to help me.
Do not try this at home. No.
So try this at home, but don't take your training wheels off until the election. So what you would do is, I mean, there are a lot of different ways of asking the question, who will win the election, right?
Yeah,
John Frawley, my teacher, famously goes on radio and predicts sports matches in England with an over 90% accuracy. But basically what we look at is you take the ruler, the current ruler, as the king in the 10th house, and as his opponent or enemy is in opposition in the 4th house. Now, it depends on who's asking. It also depends on the constitution of the country, and, basic rules apply. If Mrs. Biden is asking, will Joe win? It'll be a 1st house, 7th house thing, right?
Right.
But in general, if you're taking a neutral position, we would look at the 10th and the 4th. And in horary or classical astrology, we would look at what is the planetary ruler or lord of those houses, who is strong, how do they fit? And then you look at the moon, because the moon is the public, and the moon aspecting either of them, whether it's positive or negative, it could be a square, but if it's hitting one or the other, and not, and only one of them first, then you take that as the winner. There are other interesting aspects to doing horary political charts.
Yeah,
Arabian I know that was hard for me to follow, and I'm resigning.
He's
such a brilliant guy. He teaches at Harvard, and Mellon, and Sean. A moment.
Pardon?
We lost you for a moment.
There's an Arabian part of resignation, and that also is one that's telling in charts if you don't really get the full effect from doing a horary. Mm-hmm. One of the things about elections is everybody is asking the same question, and the universe only has so much jam or juice. So often with broad questions like that, where many people are asking the same question, you're not going to get a clear response. I think that's one of the mysteries of fate, free will, and destiny.
Yeah. That's very fascinating. So from we talked about this before we went on air, but just like, because it's been a cliffhanger. So from both of you looking at all of these charts, I mean, let's make some predictions. Why not? Live on Brahma TV, July 4th, 2020. What do you guys think? I mean, you're looking at all these charts. What's your prediction? Are you willing to put it down?
It's the business of the future to be dangerous, as Marshall McLuhan once said. He was, he did very well with his predictions. Looking at the signs, I think one of the things that's very clear to me is that whether Trump loses or wins, we're going to have the most dangerous 4 months between an election and inauguration in memory.
Yes.
I also saw indications, at least, and Tashi and I talked about it, that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is exactly on, I think, inauguration day, but it's heading in that direction. It's descending. And it hits Trump's descendant by degree. Mm-hmm. So if the star is descending, then one might think that that's the impulse. The chart that I cast for this session, it was done under, it didn't really work because there are all sorts of contraindications against testimony, some of which are really valid, where the stars just are not in the right place to get a reading. Sometimes it's a late degree or void of course moon. So right. I didn't, the other thing is medieval astrologers invented all of those, all of those contraindications because sometimes they wanted to escape having to give a reading to the king when he said, does the princess of, Romania really love me?
Right.
So they valued their heads more than the silver plying their palms at that time. I don't know. I mean, Tashi, I'm going to throw it over to you. We did do a lot of looking at the inauguration, the election. I think Trump still has a lot of power, and it can't be underestimated. And I think he's going to use it. And I think whether he wins or loses, it will be a contested election.
I definitely think it's going to be contested from what I saw here. And the other thing is, I would say with the Scorpio piece to this is, I think there's a lot hidden here. And I think it has much more, but if you want to go back to Illuminati and deep state stuff, Tashi, I think that there's a huge kind of hidden piece to this that is very important.
Yeah, and I actually totally have thought forever that the Illuminati ran this country and still feel that way, having done a lot of research on the 1600s. When they moved from England, the Rosicrucians, to America.
Yeah.
I was fascinated with Rosicrucian astrology at a period in my life. So, it's not just some idea that I have. I researched it deeply, and it's true. It's absolutely true. My sense is that there's a change coming and that he's just out of control and that it's gotten too crazy and there's too many people dying. And that's really not the intention of the Illuminati, although I don't think they're the most enlightened of people at all times. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of greed and domination submission going on here, but it's not working. There's going to be nothing but revolution no matter what.
But what if Trump was not the Illuminati's actor? Because you're taking, you're looking at that he is, which, there are many people talking about him not being, which is one of the issues of the unhappiness of his presidency beyond politic.
they'll get him out then, because the Illuminati's not putting up with this any longer, because the people aren't going to put up with it.
But let me ask you a question, because I think you're using Illuminati wrong, Tashi. I think you're using that word wrong. I'm just gonna,
Sure.
I'm gonna fight with you on this, because the Illuminati is a power elite that's holding a certain type of power in the Piscean age, that many people, more than ever, believe that actually there's actually, some of these players in rulership are trying to deconstruct the Illuminati's stronghold on planet Earth.
Right.
Which then, if you're looking at some of this astrology, you're looking at power structures beyond, the government that's being shown to us being deconstructed.
Yeah, I get your meaning, and I think that there's probably old school Illuminati and new school Illuminati fighting, perhaps. And I don't know for sure, but I guess that is definitely, when I think about it, what I feel that's happening.
Yeah.
And I don't think the old school Illuminati tricks are working on the public. I think the public's just sick of it. And I think the moon in Gemini makes it a little bit hard in these election charts. But the moon is coming towards the North Node. And so to me, that means the public is going to win. Therefore, what does the public want?
Right. And with the Scorpio, is it secret?
Well, the Scorpio, I mean, Biden has a lot of Scorpio in his chart.
Yeah.
So, you never know what's going on inside a Scorpio. You just don't. I have a planet in Scorpio, and even though I'm a chatty Gemini, I'm a very secretive individual, very private individual, because of that lovely Scorpio energy, which has allowed me, in my humble opinion, to go deep enough to actually talk to the cosmos, talk to the universe, talk to crystals, talk to plants. So as we get closer to the election, which is maybe a safer time to be making after the fall ingress, and we see how things fall out, because we're all at choice. Collective humanity is at choice, and you have to watch the choices we're going to make. So even though, I definitely see a lot of evil inside Trump, really I do. And I see also a person who has been wanting to expose what's wrong with the U.S. government and has done a pretty good job of exposing it. And I think, whether that was his conscious intention or not, he certainly noticed what's wrong.
Right.
But I don't think he's doing anything good about making it right. So, for me, it's like, no, he needs to go. So that's my hope. Yeah. Do I get my hope? It looks like it. Yeah. But not sure. We have to take the pulse.
I do think that these charts are very complex. I think we could talk a long time about them, because there's a lot of shrouding, and definitely, a huge kind of complexity. I know that's always the case, but it just seems like that's very much what's happening, especially as we get into the deeper into this Pluto return and all of it. Kevin, anything else for you that you think is important for people to be thinking about?
Well, I do agree that we're beyond statecraft, regardless of what the result is, whether it's the Illuminati or Deutsche Bank. I think conspiracy theories, which now are abounding, led by the president, tend to fill a void when fact doesn't exist. So I think that there's a professor named Alan Lichtman who has gotten the last 8 elections correct. He has a number of different testimonies that he looks at that are operative when somebody will win an election. And so far, not all the boxes are checked. So they include, scandals, social unrest. I would say those are checked. Policy change, check. Long-term economy versus short-term economy. Any third party, obviously being the incumbent, is powerful. And then charisma for the incumbent and the challenger. So I think, as you said, these are complex issues, and the internet is rife with people making prognostications about elections and all sorts of things. So I think Tashi's right. We don't have all the information right now. I think Trump's chart is stronger, though he has debilitation, I think, in terms of this health issue that keeps on coming back to me. And this consuming anger.
Yeah.
That that 12th house can be one's own worst enemy, and I think we're seeing a lot of that.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Tashi, were you going to say something?
Just that we have to see how the Gemini Moon, which it is in the November eclipse chart, all right, and it is part of what we're all dealing with. Like, you can just keep seeing this. We just have to see how this divided psyche in the collective of the world, really, how does it heal? How is it healing? And as Mercury stations on Sirius, and it's stationed on Sirius, it'll cross Sirius again. We have an eclipse tonight on Sirius. Can we get back to this deep level of what our humanity means to each of us?
Yeah. And
it certainly doesn't mean, throwing balloons or knives at people who have a different political opinion than you do.
Right.
There's good points in both parties, really. So I don't know. Stay tuned for Libra. We can come back during the Libra equinox.
Well,
the astrosophers say that this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius is the conjunction of annunciation.
Annunciation. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Sorry. What does that?
Cut to 6 BC.
And you're so erudite. What do you mean?
No, cut to the birth of Jesus.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So I think we're preparing the stage.
Not for the second coming exactly, but for definitely another level of
the affairs of two gray men, as T.S. Eliot would say, may not actually, or as Humphrey Bogart would say, may not amount to a hill of beans with regard to what's happening on a cosmic level between forces that may be expressed by one or another or both, or the people who follow them or don't follow them. So one of the things that Tashi and I always see, especially when I do a horary chart for her, is how perfect it is. Mm-hmm. Not the work, I'm joking, but how the perfection of divine plan is expressed in the way that it comes together in a very articulated way in something as small as a horary chart cast on a computer screen.
And I do just to mention, because I also talked about this with Barbara Henclau, is this solstice, this winter solstice for Northern Hemisphere people, or Southern Hemisphere summer solstice. This is this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that you're talking about. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
At 0 degrees Aquarius.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a major kind of moment of I believe, like the next, or we could call it, Tashi, the ninth wave. This is the ninth wave in the Mayan codices, and I mean, this is really it's a very powerful time to be alive, as you can tell from any cosmological point of view.
It's exciting. It's crazy exciting.
Yeah. I could talk to you guys for hours. Kevin, I love you. You're amazing. What an amazing wisdom
Back at
keeper.
you.
I know. I just so really very touched by you, and thank you for your wisdom and your time today. And we should have another one of these conversations after the equinox, if you guys are up for it.
My pleasure, and thank you for joining us, Kevin.
Well, thank you to you, and also to Tashi. It's a gift to be able to talk with you both. And, we're maybe at that point we can talk about some of Tashi's new books.
I hope so. Tashi, what's our plan with the book? When is it coming out?
Okay, so the first book, the EA Basics, is ready. It's probably shipping next week. We're shipping, what are they called? PDF, interactive online books.
Ebooks.
Yes, ebooks. Thank you. I knew that word. Somewhere
in
the cloud. I put it in the cloud. That's why I couldn't access the cloud. I was offline. Now I can make excuses now.
You were having an Aquarian moment in the clouds.
I was. So, and the Vastu book is going to the midwife right after she ships us back the ebook. So Kevin's helping me market these things. He's a brilliant man on many levels. So thank you so much, Guru Jagat. And you can go find the books at enlighteningtimes.com and you'll see bookstore. You'll see a store.
And they're already for sale, Tashi?
Oh, yeah, you can pre-order.
You are so busy over there. I'm so proud of you.
Forthcoming, I have to say, is her book on retrograde planets, planetary healing, and more to come.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Tashi, I hope my Mercury retrograde assignment will be not too late now.
No, we're waiting for you.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna do. Now I'm gonna get off and do it right now.
Thank you in advance for that.
Yeah, exactly. Tashi, thank you so much, and Kevin, thank you, and just a delight to be with you both.
Listen, I'm so happy to introduce the audience to Kevin. Kevin is a reluctant astrologer, but I can get him to if you want him to.
We love the reluctance. We love it. Yeah. Okay, thank you both. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.